feels like it's been ages since we last connected, but I'm very happy to say I am back. On the show today, we are privileged to be joined by Mr. Ray Buchanan, who is the founder of the international hunger relief agency Stop Hunger Now. Now, Ray co-founded Stop Hunger Now in 1998, 16 years ago, following an 18-year career as the founder and co-director of the Society of St. Andrew, which is a Virginia-based domestic food relief organization. Ray is fueled by his vision of ending hunger in his lifetime and has dedicated himself to helping those in the greatest need. Ray created Stop Hunger Now as an entrepreneurial model for providing rapid, cost-effective responses to international crisis situations. Ray and his work have also appeared in various media, such as the Washington Post, the San Francisco Examiner, the LA Times, with TV appearances on news channels such as NBC and CBS News. Now, Ray is also the recipient of various humanitarian awards, such as the University of North Carolina at Wilmington Alumnus of the Year Award, the Caring Institute National Caring Award, the North Carolina International Human Rights Award, and the International Affairs Council's Citizen of the World Award. Hello, Ray. It's such an honor to have you with us today.
It's good to be with you, Shabs.
It's been 35 years for you working to end hunger. What inspires you to do this work?
What inspires me is the reality that I know that working together, we can make a real difference in the world. I think we live in a world that's broken, but working together, we can heal that world. And what inspires me more than anything else is the knowledge, the scientific knowledge, that this generation is the first generation in the history of the planet that could end hunger forever if we decided to do it.
What actually drives you to continue with your mission of ending hunger?
Knowing that we can do it drives me, and I'm fueled by seeing all the people that we work with at Stop Hunger Now getting inspired simply by packaging meals and working together. They realize that as an individual, they can make a difference. And I think what we need to end hunger is just people willing to take the lead, to become leaders, to show others that we don't have to do a lot. We can just do a little, but if we all work together, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And Ray, has working in this field over the last 35 years, has it impacted you as a person, changed you in any way?
Oh yeah, of course it has. I mean, you can't work and walk alongside the poor and hungry without it changing you. And for the 18 years that I was the director of the Society of St. Andrew, I worked with the hungry just within the United States. And so I know about hunger in our country, and the U.S. is the richest, most affluent country in the history of the planet. And that anybody goes hungry in this country is obscene. But hunger is a true problem and getting worse in the United States, and that needs to be addressed. But the hunger in the United States, although it's real, it's nothing at the level of hunger around the world. In the United States, we have 35, 40 million people that go hungry on a regular basis. That's they go without food 2 or 3 days a month, or they have to eat less, one meal a day, to make the food last. But in the United States, no one starves. No one dies of hunger. Where around the world, every single day, 25,000 of our brothers and sisters will die because they don't get enough food to eat. That's just unconscionable. We need to do something about that.
So you obviously have a wealth of knowledge on this subject. From your experience, can you tell us what are the main causes of hunger?
Well, there's just a lot of causes. Deep down, I think one of the major causes is we don't care. I mean, on the planet right there now, there's more than enough food to feed every single person. In fact, if we fed everybody just grains, just grain like rice and wheat and corn and millet and maize, everybody would have at least 2,500 calories a day. That's amazing. That's exactly what an adult male needs to sustain an active lifestyle. And so that doesn't count meat or vegetables or berries or fruits or nuts or oils. So there's a lot more food than we need. the real cause of hunger is that food is not distributed equitably.
Okay.
That's the bottom line.
That is the bottom line, right?
That is the bottom line.
Okay. And who would you say are the most affected by hunger?
The poor. I'm teaching a university course now, and last night was the first class, and we were talking about that in class. I got into hunger because I was a pastor of a church, and I thought I was just going to be helping my church raise money for hungry in Ethiopia way back in the 70s. But once I started dealing with hunger and tried to learn the underlying causes of hunger, I realized that hunger is always connected to poverty.
Yeah.
It's the poor that are always hungry. Even in a famine where there's no food available, the people with financial resources always eat.
Yeah.
It's always the poor. So if you're going to deal with hunger, you have to deal with poverty.
Right.
And if you start dealing with poverty, you find out, why are people poor? They're powerless. The poor have no power. They have no voice. They're the unseen, the unheard. I call them the walking dead. We walk right by them.
Right.
And so if you deal with hunger, you have to deal with the underlying cause, which is poverty. And when you start dealing with poverty, you have to deal with the balance of power. And that's what we're talking about in the class. The powerlessness of the poor is what keeps them hungry.
Right.
And when you want to deal with why are people powerless, you have to start dealing. We don't have true community. Most of us have some degree of spirituality, whether we're Muslim or Jewish or Christian or pagan or whatever. We all have a spirituality, and in all the major religions of the world that I've worked with, we all understand that we're all one family, a human family. That's pretty much basic. Yet we don't believe that. We say we believe that, but we don't, because if we really believed it, we wouldn't allow family to go hungry.
Right. Yeah.
And so that it's that lack of community that we can see someone on the street that we know are hungry and walk by them. And so we've got to get back to where we realize we are one human family.
Do you feel there is a link between the obesity epidemic and hunger, world hunger?
There definitely is a link, and one of the most frightening statistics that I'm seeing now is that even in Africa and in areas where hunger is endemic, obesity is on the rise. And I know in the United States and in probably UK and other places, a lot of the obesity among the poor and the hungry comes from not having the money to buy good food. It's a lot cheaper to buy chips or fries, which
just cheaper,
are empty,
right?
empty calories. It's cheaper and it's quicker. And in the United States, we have something called food deserts now. We're in the low income areas where in the areas where the poor live, a lot of the major grocery stores are moving out. It's not economically viable for them to stay in those areas, and so they close those stores, and so that means the poor don't have access to good food. I know a number of people in areas of my city that they shop at convenience stores, at service stations, at gas stations, where the only thing they can get are Cokes and candy and chips and,
easily available, right?
Easily available, cheap, and that people cause obesity and undernourishment. So
it's the undernourishment. And is there any way around this problem? Because obviously we have the food, but it's not the right sort of nutrition, is it? But it's better to have something than nothing, I guess.
Well, of course, but again, I deal with a lot of folks, and I say one of the answers is education. We need to educate those that need the food to what is good, but education is not enough if there's not the resources to get the food if they know what's good. We have to make fresh fruits and vegetables available and desirable for the hungry so that we all eat better. I think it's a problem for all of us.
So what I'm hearing here is that hunger isn't just a problem confined to the poorer nations. It's very much real and present here in the West as well.
definitely.
It's not as visible, but it's very
It's
present.
not. It's more hidden. It's well hidden in the UK and the US and Europe, but it's just as real. You know, the big problem is we don't end hunger because it's not on the political agenda. It's not on the political agenda because the poor people don't have a voice. Our elected officials, our government officials, don't care about the people that they can't hear. And if a person doesn't have the political clout, their needs are not addressed. And so it's incumbent on us who care, who have the gift of citizenship, for example, to use that citizenship to influence our officials to do more on behalf of the poor and hungry. It's about, you know, if my sister was hungry, there's nothing I wouldn't do to get her food. I would share the food in my kitchen with her, naturally. I would also write her a check. And if I didn't have money to write her a check, I would try to go to the bank and borrow money. And if I wasn't allowed to do that, I would ask my friends. I'd say, Shabs, my sister's hungry. Can you help me? Because she's my sister. And I wouldn't be embarrassed to ask a friend to help. If I couldn't do that, I would go on the street and beg because I'm not going to allow my sister to go hungry. And, you know, I don't want to sound flip about this, but if there was no other way to get help for my sister, I would break the law.
Which
All right.
happens all the time. Yeah.
Which happens all the time because there's some things more important than law, and feeding my family, feeding my sister is one of them. Now, in order to end hunger in the world, we have got to come to the place, all of us, where we realize that child in Africa who's going to die of measles because he's malnourished is my son, my daughter, my brother. And we have to treat him as we would our our immediate family. Yeah. And when we start doing that, we'll be a little more outraged. We'll act a little more aggressively on behalf of the poor and hungry. I'm wearing a T-shirt right now. You can't see it, but there's a billion people who suffer from hunger, and I'm mad as hell. Right. You know, and somehow we've got to go beyond respectability to the place of outrage where we make our voices heard on behalf of those whose voice can't be heard.
You co-founded Stop Hunger Now,
right,
in 1998. Can you tell us what are the main activities of this organization?
Right. For the first 7 years of the organization, we were a crisis relief organization. I went into areas of natural disaster, violence, political upheaval, war, and made sure people got fed. And it was an emergency relief organization. After about 7 years, I was able to educate my board of directors enough to where I helped them realize that hunger in crisis situations is only 5 or 10% of the real world hunger. Most of the world hunger comes from chronic hunger and malnutrition. And so we started changing the direction of Stop Hunger Now to where we started a systemic attack on hunger. We started looking at hunger at a deeper level. And at that point, we started focusing on providing meals for school children around the world. Knowing that that was more systemic in our approach and would do a lot more good long term. And so for the last 12 years or whatever, however long it is, don't know my math, we Stop Hunger Now has been getting volunteers, and we're packaging high protein dehydrated meals to target school feeding programs. Now, I need to tell you about school feeding programs, or tell your audience. School feeding programs is miraculous. Now, I'm a preacher, so I can use that term miracle. What happens when you provide meals at school? The enrollment doubles, triples, quadruples, or even quintuples, because children who are hungry will come to school when there's food.
All right, yeah.
Well, they come to eat. To be honest, they come to eat. I talked with a head mistress in Uganda outside of Kampala, and she said when she started the feeding program, the kids were like feral animals. Wow. They were living on the street. They were scavenging food. Some of them were selling themselves to buy food, whatever it took. And when they first came to school, they were like animals because they would fight over the food. They would eat till they got sick. They would try to steal the food and take it with them because they didn't know they would eat the next day. But after about 2 or 3 weeks, those children realized that if they came to school every day, they were going to be fed every day. And so they settled down and actually started learning, which was remarkable. All the teachers and principals that I talk to say that after about 6 weeks of these meals, eating every day, you can see a difference in the children's skin. The skin is the first thing you notice. It becomes more supple, and the essential oils and stuff are there, and their skin is not dry and flaky. But the headmistress in Uganda told us the thing that meant most to her was after about 6, 8 weeks, about 2 months, she said she noticed the little girls in her class had started braiding their hair again.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't sound like anything to us, but in a culture where braided hair is the norm, these little girls, after a couple of months, had enough vitamins and minerals back in their system because of these meals that their hair wouldn't break every time they touched it. And so that's huge. But what happens is these kids come to school, they double, triple, quadruple the number of kids, and most of that enrollment increase is girls. Because in most of the countries where hunger is the biggest problem, girls are not allowed to go to school. If one, it costs to go to school, so only the eldest boy goes to school, or only the boys go to school, because in so many places women and girls are not considered important enough to go to school. And in fact, in South Sudan, where we're doing some work, the village elders were saying, we'll allow our girls to go to primary school, but they can't go beyond primary school because it will lower their bride price, because nobody wants an educated wife. And I mean, that's sad. But what happens is, when you get girls in school, magic happens. What we know from years and years of study is that if a girl can learn to read and write, that's basic literacy, the birth rate is cut from over 8 children to under 3 children. So if a woman has 5 less children across her lifetime, one of the world's biggest health problems is maternal health. Maternal health has dramatically increased because a girl has learned to read and write. She learns to read and write because we're feeding her meals at school. So she's going to school, she's eating every day, and she's learning basic literacy, which means her entire life will be changed. Absolutely. All right. And when a woman has 5 less children across her lifetime, when she does have children, those children are born larger, stronger, healthier. Why? Because her body's not depleted. That means infant mortality, which is another major health issue, is dramatically addressed. Why? Because kids have gone to school. Why do they go to school? Because they were feeding them in school. I went on a tour a couple of years ago, and we visited 7 countries and 28 schools where we're feeding meals. And every headmaster, every headmistress told us the same thing. Without Stop Hunger and Meals, the kids don't come to school. If they don't come to school, there's no education. If there's no education, now get this, every one of them said there's no hope, there's no future for their country. Wow. So these people who are closest to the children realize that feeding programs at school is connected, integral with the future of their country. Right. So for the last 8 or 9 years, Stop Hunger Now has been focusing on providing meals for school children, knowing that that will change the whole cycle of poverty in those countries. Now, that's only half of what we do. Feeding school kids is important, but no matter how many millions of meals that we provide, we'll never end hunger by feeding people. Now, I'm going to stop and say that again, because this is as important as anything I'll say. You'll never end hunger by feeding people. Yeah. That does sound, counterintuitive, but it's true. We're only going to end hunger by creating a world where hunger doesn't exist. Yes. All right, and that takes a movement, which is the other part of what Stop Hunger Now does. I said we use volunteers to package these meals. The reason we use volunteers is to create a movement. We're trying to get people involved. It would be so easy to have machines do what we do. But instead, we use volunteers. And this year alone, we'll probably use 200,000 volunteers in the U.S. alone. They come together, they work together to package these meals, and they learn leadership, they learn volunteerism, they learn how that one person can make a difference. And what is so exciting about using the volunteers is they get excited and they get inspired because they have an opportunity to touch these meals, and they know that when they put those meals in the box, the next time that box is open, they're feeding school kids that otherwise wouldn't eat. And literally, the meals that we provide, 90 to 95% of the meals that the kids eat, that's the only meal that child will eat that day. I mean, that's amazing. And what's happened because of that is our program is growing to now we have programs in South Africa. We have programs in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. We have programs in the Philippines. We have programs in Italy. And now this year we'll open in Peru. We're looking at opening in Canada. We're looking at opening in India. People around the world want to make a difference. And we want to create a global movement to end hunger. So that's what Stop Hunger Now is doing. This year, we'll probably provide 50 million meals to school kids around the world from 8 or 9 locations around the world. So very, very excited about that.
Yeah, so it's just not in the US, it's abroad as well.
It's abroad and it's growing very fast. This year we will do hunger events that will involve volunteers in over 20 countries.
Right, okay, that's phenomenal. And do you have any short and long-term goals for Stop Hunger Now?
Well, our short-term goals is we want to be packaging 150 million meals a year within the next 5 years. And this year we're doing 50 million meals. So that's some big growth. But ultimately, we want to work ourselves out of a job. Yeah. We want to create enough involvement with volunteers that movement actually is real, where people like you and I around the world stand together and link arms and say, we're not going to tolerate hunger anymore. Right. And when enough of us do that, the leaders will have to follow.
Yeah, they have to. They have no other choice. So, Ray, how can we raise more awareness about ending world hunger, and what can each of us as individuals do to see the end of this problem in our lifetime?
Well, I think all of us need to realize that as an individual, every one of us can make a difference. The important thing to remember is there's nothing that we do on behalf of the hungry that's too small to make a difference. Everything we do counts. But in a world of electronic media, all of us can be leaders. All of us have Twitter accounts. All of us have Facebook accounts. All of us know how to use YouTube. And so basically, all we have to do to be a leader is get on our Twitter account and tweet, 25,000 of my brothers and sisters will die today because of hunger. Let's stop it. And all of a sudden, when we all start sharing that message, and, we can talk about organizations that we support that does a good job with helping the hungry. We can promote that through our Twitter and Facebook to where more people, social media, exactly. And the more we use social media, the more our leadership extends. It doesn't take much to be a leader today with social media. If everybody would simply get on their social media and say, I want to help the hungry, help me help the hungry, we would spread that movement so rapidly, and we would see an end of hunger in our lifetime. That's what I'm after. That's our long-term goal, is to end hunger in our lifetime.
Experience, has the problem of hunger reduced or increased over the years?
Actually, no. Hunger is decreasing. We're making a difference. One of the greatest things that's happened in our generation is the United Nations set up what they call the Millennium Development Goals. And actually 2015 is the end of the period of Millennium Development Goals. But in the last 15 years, extreme poverty has been cut in half. Think about that. And the actual number of hungry has decreased in most areas of the world. It's still rising in some areas of the continent of Africa, but hunger is on the decrease, and a number of countries have actually cut the number of hungry in half. And I think one of the things we can do is set international goals like that and hold our feet to the fire and urge countries to meet those goals and be supportive of our politicians who do, and hold our politicians who aren't interested accountable.
What is your vision for the future if we are to see the end of hunger in our lifetime?
Well, what we're going to have to do is get serious, and we're going to have to forget about trying to be respectable, and we're going to have to get more active. And by that, I don't want to use the word aggressive but we have to get more aggressive in our care and concern for the hungry. Most of us care more about being accepted and respectable than we do about making a difference. If we really want to make a difference, we've got to get to the place where it becomes a passion with us. We can yell, we can holler, and we can scream about Manchester United or whatever our favorite football team is. But if we scream about helping the hungry, we're radical and we're fool. We've got to get as serious about helping our family who are starving as we do about our sports. And if we did that, it would change the world immediately. It would not take much if talking about a government level, if the governments of the developed countries in the world would agree to feed school children. We could feed school children, and it would cost a lot less than all the military activities we're doing right now. I'm not saying to cut away the military, because I know some of that is important. But if nations would really focus on ending feeding school kids around the world, we could end hunger in the next 15 years. And so a big part of what we need to do is influence our governments, as I keep saying. But as individuals, what I say is look around you. In your community, there's something you can do. There's a food pantry that you can help with. There's a soup kitchen where you can help. But if you find someone who is poor and hungry and get to know them and become a friend, it changes the way you look at the situation.
There's always a story behind that, isn't there?
There's always a story. You're not going to let your sister go hungry. And when we get to the place where we treat each other as brothers and sisters, we're not going to let each other go hungry. And on an individual level, I think that's where it starts. We start developing community, and we're going to see a lot less violence and a lot more compassion. And I think that's where we start on an individual level.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us do really care, but sometimes it's just a matter of, what can I actually do? Do I have a voice? And actually we do, but it's just bringing that back to,
right.
The realization that I can do something.
Don't be embarrassed to speak out about something you're passionate about. Yeah. If we get to the place where, instead of having a shirt with our sports team on it, we have a shirt with I'm passionate about hunger, or I'm passionate about domestic violence. And, we start talking about those things and doing it in a civil way, but engaging our friends with that, I think will make a difference.
Are there any useful resources that you can direct us to where we can go to find out more about the actions that we can take to reduce the problem of hunger?
I think there's a couple. I would point everybody toward the World Food Program, WFP. You can just put WFP on your website and then they'll pull it up. World Food Program is the United Nations hunger program. It's the world's largest humanitarian agency. They feed like 85 million people a day. Wow. And so they're a wealth of knowledge and facts about global hunger, and you can at their site pull up individual countries and find out what the statistics are. United Nations, UNICEF is another one if you're interested in children. UNICEF is again a global organization that really makes a difference. And I would point people to Stop Hunger Now, not because it's my organization, but that website is a good website to find out what people are doing locally around the world, and will give anybody ideas of what they can do. And there's a lot of YouTube videos of Stop Hunger Now events around the world. So those are some agencies that would be helpful for people to look at.
Sure. And Ray, I'll be putting those links to Stop Hunger Now and other useful resources that you've mentioned just below this video. So that you click on those links and then navigate to those relevant websites.
Oh, appreciate that.
Just to wrap up this interview, do you have any final thoughts or a message that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Yes. We are blessed to live in the first generation in the history of this planet that has the power to end hunger forever. Hunger has stalked humanity from the dawn of recorded history. But our generation, your generation, is the first generation that has it in our grasp to eradicate hunger forever if we want to do it. The question is, what do we really want? Wow.
Ray, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I think it does all start with raising our awareness about the subject, and which is very important to me. And I believe that we have achieved that today. So by doing this interview, so thank you.
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Appreciate it, Shabs.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, let's play our part in making this world a better place.